what I wanted to say very briefly about the slice of characters and races and classes. First of all, I think that design philosophy, 100% on board with that. I wouldn't conceive of doing this any other way. The one thing that I found, and I think I alluded to this once or twice during our game, the one thing that I found a little bit confusing maybe is that the races that we went with and the classes that we went with, by and large, had very, very few signifiers, right? A Minotaur, to me at least, means something in the context of Greek mythology and then later use in 20th century art. A Githzerai, stripped of the Githyanki, stripped of the Mind Flayers, stripped of whatever like civil war they had, I'm not sure what that is to me. Like that only exists to me in the context of the 1979 Fiend Folio and all of its little D&D-isms that they could attach to it. And the Shard Mind is something that's even more sort of nebulous and undefined. And in addition to that, we had these four classes, or at least three of the psionic classes, that don't really have a whole lot of cultural baggage associated with them, right? A monk means something, but a battle mind, I'm not, like, I played one, I don't really know what that is exactly.
Right.
And and I think as a design choice, I'm curious about that, because one of the things that I felt about the game as a player is that there are different amounts of setting material that go into particular games, right? So that in Slay With Me, the setting is essentially like 10 sentence fragments, right? And maybe just a little bit more. Whereas something like, I don't know, Vampire, you've got books and books and books of setting. Where a player feels comfortable is somewhere between 10 sentence fragments and 10, monographs. And for me, I think that I would have been a little bit slightly more comfortable from a creative standpoint if we had something a little bit like that the amount of stuff that you wrote for Azakar, or that maybe Clinton wrote for some of the cultures in Shadow of Yesterday, that's, somewhere between 250 to maybe 1,000 words on, like, who are these dudes? Like what's actually going on? Like, why is it? Why is the world supposed that way? And that may have been something we could have done in like a Primetime Adventures type of jam session at the very beginning, and we sort of work that out. I didn't think, in practice, I don't think we actually had any problems with the way it was. But I think that if we had played more, I would have wanted to flesh that out.
My take was that it's the kind of thing that fleshes out very nicely in play. I was really hoping. You see, I always like when you posted pretty much what you just said back in out of play. I switched off the screen and went and curled up in the corner and sniffled for a while, because I thought that my 1, 2, 4 sentence phrasing per race, per class, but particularly per race in the little handout, I put my heart into every syllable, and I took I read the sentence and I took the end of the sentence and this fits better in the middle of the sentence, just so it will punch home harder. Please hear my soul, read these sentences. And so
it was a much better orientation than the class stuff. I will definitely say that.
So but all that said, I was really hoping that was going to go somewhere, particularly with the Githyanki, because I really retains the whole slave race, throws it off, and then suddenly realizes they have to decide who they are. Is all of our traditions just coping with slavery? If so, do we have to do that? That kind of thing. So I know that we experienced, if anything, that much of that in play itself. But, you're right. In terms of, this wasn't a publication, right? But if it were, then that's exactly what would be called for. But it would be so painful. You say 250 to 1,000 words, I completely agree with you. But in any given instance, if the last 100 of those 1,000 words was too much, it would be disastrous. So it's that's a really finely honed edge of just how much to strike and how deep with that. I think I did a better job with it, although it's not a completed or finished document, with the heretical ecclesiastic stuff. Partly because it's better. First of all, it's working with more iconic imagery. James, do you know about this? This is the one that I came up with. I actually made the whole document available at the Patreon at one point, which was that the Great Church had come about, and every metaphysical conflict in the entire multiverse was done because we're now all part of the one church, right?
Yeah.
And so like all the different gods and stuff were basically just departments in this enormous metaphysical universal corporation, basically, and that the only races to play were humans and tieflings, and the only classes were cleric, avenger, invoker, and paladin.
Right, the divines.
Right, but one class was also available for, not hybridizing, for multi-classing. And it could be multi-classed with any of them, and it was optional, which was warlock. So it's really compelling. I mean, you look at the tieflings, you look at the people, you look at the imagery of it, and it just all snaps together and like, oh my God, Michael Moorcock and the Catholic Church have a baby once again. We're on it.
Yeah.
I know, Ross, you've spent a fair amount of time looking at that material, I think, right? Thinking about
yes, I did.
Yeah.
I might be the most great.
And that doesn't have much more in the way of the background stuff, but it's very God heavy, and so the gods are pretty. I mean, I could see how each one would need it's a nice solid paragraph,
Well, and to James' point, I think the classes are much more iconic.
Absolutely,
there.
yeah, very iconic in that case. That's what I was thinking too. Is that, and also the races, one of them being human and one of them being devil people, is real quick and easy to grasp as well.
And no angel people.
Right. Yeah, I thought about having the second player handbook, second edition or second handbook.
Diva.
Yeah, the divas in there, but they weren't fitting, so I didn't. And besides, there was something so clean about what I had in mind, so medieval, that I really wanted to go with it. But I agree, basically. So fortunately, we weren't talking about a publication, so the weirdest thing about it to me was that all of you, I think, understandably and very, to your credit, wanted backstory for your characters. And they even had those backgrounds in there, right? The phrases. And I guess I always thought of those as jumping forward points. And when I realized as we played that most of you felt them as, and we must, where's my origin issue?
Right.
And I was thinking, but no, those were our jumping off points. Why do you want to go back and look at that in more detail? We have details to look at here, But then I realized that was actually kind of important to you guys. And I was going, if we go forward, I would actually want to do something.
Well, for me, it was only important from a creative standpoint because there was kind of this void that was essentially being reserved for future play.
Right.
And so if the future and everywhere else we're going to go is future play, it's like, well, where did I come from, right? And what do I actually have to jam with here? It's like, oh, okay, I've got this exile coming back to kick ass type storyline, which is, it's the easy thing to use and then choose some scenery on, rather than trying to fret up and foreshadow other bits of setting. It was the one bit of setting that I could riff on.
Yeah.
It wasn't backstory per se. It was just sort of like, okay, what do I do here creatively? What's my music, or my sheet music in this particular bit? It's
also tricky too, because since I was dedicated to throwing at you something relatively, I don't know if rich is the word so much as stinky and massy, but through the level worth of material that I came up with to play in, or rather the extensive material within which you could find what you were going to level up with, basically choosing who do I kill. That was, given my psychedelic maze making, given my my enjoyment of, well, this is great, I get to be kind of irresponsible and just make up some wacky shit, let's go. I'm I'm not even cursed by a map where all the pieces are attached. This is great.
Right.
Means that you guys, I mean, where were you gonna have the time? Where were you gonna have the? And I wasn't making up any like hooks. I didn't bring in like, with the example of Exec, who was pretty much just a means to get you in one spot. I didn't really have any other glue together back history for you guys to grab onto. I wasn't like I didn't bring in somebody that Azalea knew.
Right.
I didn't bring in evidence of her old warband as part of this. I think I touch on that a tiny bit actually in here and there where you encountered stuff. I was thinking about it anyway, that I was going to start throwing in more and more stuff that your characters would actually recognize from your own backstories. But the trouble is, I didn't want to play both ends. I didn't want to say, oh, look, you remember this. And the player obediently says, oh, old comrade, how wonderful to see you. And then look at me and say, how do I know this guy? What is going on here? And then you see I'm playing both ends, right? I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, so it was a little bit tricky to figure out where to go with that.
I'm just wondering whether it would have just made a difference from what James was saying if we just then, the next level was, we encounter like a community of Minotaurs and there's stuff that, not that they have to be connected to his character particularly, but just that gives us a different.
I definitely had that in mind. I actually had Minotaurs in mind for the next round, especially because man, have you seen those especially monstrous Minotaurs they've got in the monster manuals? Like
there's some Paragon level ones that looked pretty nasty.
Yeah, there are these. There's a whole cult of Minotaurs who eat the hearts of monsters and gain warped versions of what those monsters can do. So they're the ones that eat the unicorns are like heinous, just heinous, terrifying. And so I was actually kind of impressed. I was like, man, I'm scared looking at that picture. So yeah, you could have looked forward to some of that nastiness going on.
Yeah, I definitely felt a little bit more comfortable with the created background because it felt like, okay, I know most about what's going on there. That's what's in my character's past is somehow made.
Right, I'm a construct. Right. Yeah.
I'm a construct. We'll see where that goes. And I actually did get some exposure to crystal entities and things going on in our encounter there. So it felt like a little bit more grounded for my character than I can see for the other ones too. But yeah, again, it's the making sure you have enough of the color without going so far that it becomes.
I don't want to play your characters through my content.
Delivered under you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think maybe I'm with James in that I think a little bit more would have been good in this game. But in general, it's certainly in the history of D&D, the crime is far more often going too far the other way.
Yes. Yes.
I
will tell you what I. I'll tell you the one thing that puzzled me. Why was the world the way it was? Why was why were the classes essentially the four psionics plus the barbarian, right? So there's this thematic thing that is very, very wrong, right? I mean, this is very consistent with your design ethic that the players end up having to sort of straddle somewhat uncomfortably this setting division between these highly disciplined, highly focused folks, and then these people who are just like, we're going to get all visceral about everything. And it seems to me that there's some open space there as far as like human psychology. Where did those people go? I mean, what was the deal with the setting with that this is how it polarized? Because we didn't need to get all the way there. As a player or as a creative person, like that's like these monasteries, right? Like who maintains the stuff? And I don't need it like in the sense of because you and I have talked about this before in the context of comics. I don't need this in the sense of like a Mark Grunwald, fully worked out backstory.
Right. I was going to say, if you want the full Keynesian analysis of fragmented dimensional economics, I don't think I'm going to be able to manage that one. But I think that the aesthetic at work, if not the justification, was to almost literally explode the stereotypical fantasy setting.
Okay.
That there was, if not entirely Tolkien-esque, but there was kind of an elfy dwarfy or similar, megaverse, and that my fictional explosion of it was like a thematic explosion of it. We're not doing that.
Gotcha.
But more importantly, I liked the idea that the Minotaurs were themselves a new race in terms of this universe, and that they emerged from the vortices, and they had those of which who had come out of the vortices to live in sort of livable space, formed tribes. Now and then the Githzeri, I thought of them as having been a slave race of some mind flayer like entity or entities prior to all this, and that the fragmenting of it all basically freed them. And so all of the monasteries and stuff was their culture that they actually had preserved.
Gotcha.
And so therefore they were still using it, and it's kind of fortunate because their psionics still worked. Magic was gone. There is no magic.
Gotcha.
But the psionics still work, and they are in tune with the way the universe kind of is. And then the Shardminds, like the Minotaurs, but even more so, are, they wouldn't even exist if the crystalline interstices of reality had not been shattered into multiple pieces. They wouldn't even exist. So I think that was kind of where I was coming from in terms of why the world is what it is. And in fact, when I played the first version of it, at the most dangerous thing in the vortex that I made up for that game was a little pocket of the past. And the monster that they faced was a spring nymph who, basically offered to them, look, I'm keeping the past, the real world alive right here. Join, come and play. Come be safe in my spring forever.
Right.
You never have to leave. You never have to go out again. And it and I actually I remember that being a pretty compelling scene, actually. Sure. There was a Minotaur in that game as well, and the Minotaur was very tempted. The Minotaur was like, and I didn't have the same justification for Minotaurs. They were kind of like basically fantasy Minotaurs. And he was kind of like, what? Yeah. Return to the forest? Frisk in the autumn leaves, and again with the nature goddess?
Yeah.
And of course his comrades are like, shut up, whap, whap, whap. So it was no, come back to chaos, hardship, fragmentation, and chaos, right? Come on back. He was like, but aren't you listening to yourselves? So, it wasn't quite the same setup this time, but you can see that's the kind of thing that was on my mind,
Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. That if this had gone on, I think that's something that I would have wanted either in the next adventure or the one after it. Like some sort of. Yeah. That
I was thinking along those lines that there needed to be a little more grounding going on. Around about now that we've really tasted the odd. Yeah.
And if we'd gotten that, that would have completely sated my whatever it is my perk there. That would have been perfect.
Yeah, I've found that Spring Nymph is a 7th level monster, and I found her to be a formidable foe against a party a few levels below that. Yeah. Extremely formidable and very enjoyable, actually. That was my first exposure to the utility, the force of these characters, these monsters they made up, that could throw around different kinds of days and dominates, and also pull. The idea that you had to keep approaching her, that you pulled, she just pulled. So, and we found in play, I mean, you read it on the page and you're kind of like, you're thinking of a battle map in miniatures, and it's not really like meaning very much to you. You're just shifting a piece. But when you're playing and the player character moves closer and closer and closer to her with each turn, it's really creepy.
Right.